In the last 24 hours, Ukraine was able to liberate 12 settlements in Kherson, and today I will show you most of them. There is also a very big chance that the entire northern part of Kherson region can be fully liberated by the end of this week. And as soon as Ukraine can cross Dnipro river, this is going to be game over for Russians. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and talk about the incredible counteroffensive of Ukrainians in Kherson. On this map you can see how much land Ukraine was able to retake back in Kherson region just in the last several days alone. And right now let's see a lot of photos and videos from these liberated settlements. And our first picture comes to us from liberated Pitikhatki. Then we go to its neighbor Baraznetsky and we can see that Ukraine were able to retake it as well. Going a little bit down the road, we can see a picture from liberated Kucherske. And then a little bit to the west, here is a video from liberated Staritsa. Couple more kilometers to the northwest, we can see that the residents of Bruskinsky meeting their Ukrainian liberators. And then right here is the video from deoccupied Ishchenka. And now let's move a little bit closer to the current front lines. So right here we can see a picture from liberated Tamarine. And the next video comes to us from extremely important logistically deoccupied Snihurivka. And I mean, just take a look how the residents of this settlement meet these Ukrainian soldiers. The question is this how civilians meet their liberators, or is this how they meet their occupiers? And I guess it is pretty obvious that this video says it all. And finally, here is another video from extremely important settlement liberated Kiselyovka. And one of the reasons why this specific place is so crucial, it is because it is only less than 15 kilometers until Kherson city. And besides these settlements which I just mentioned, Ukrainian forces were also able to liberate Stanislav, Pavlovka, Yurivka, Afanasievka, Bobrovy Kut, Evgenievka and Soldatskaya. Which according to this video means that pretty much almost the entire Mykolaiv region is now fully liberated. And in order to make this 100% official, Ukraine still has to liberate this part of Kinburskaya Kosa. In the next couple of days there will be a lot of good news from Ukraine. And if you don't want to miss these updates, please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and send me a message and I will reply to you. Alright, and now let's see some more footage specifically from Kherson city itself. And first of all, it is worth mentioning that Pentagon itself was able to confirm that Russian forces do retreat from Kherson. And right here, for example, we can see Russians crossing Dnipro river. What they basically say is that with the amount of equipment and logistical problems, it will be simply impossible for them to defend Kherson. And in the end of this video, they say that they wish to come back to this region in the nearest future. Okay, good luck. And do you think Ukrainians will allow Russians to retreat just like that? Of course, no. Because in this video right here, we can see Ukrainians shelling retreating Russians. Some of these missiles were targeting Russian positions on the left side of Dnipro river. And reportedly, Ukrainians continued to damage Antonovsky bridge. And then right here we have another video of a retreating Russian who is talking about his experience in Kherson. And what he basically says is that people should not believe the statements from Russian authorities, and in fact, the situation is far worse than even people expect. In the end, he also says that one of the last orders from his officers and generals was to find civilian clothes and literally save their lives. And as always, while retreating, Russians try to inflict as much final damage as possible. They try to destroy as much energy infrastructure as they can on their way out, as well as some cell towers, as you can see right here. And we even have some unconfirmed reports that Russians attacked the Kakhovka hydro plant and its dam. And if you remember, the biggest risk of destroying it is that this entire area might be flooded. But at the same time, it was relatively expected that Russians will do it in order to cover their retreat. And in case these reports are confirmed, this is pretty much exactly what is happening. In addition to that, as expected, retreating Russians leave a lot of presents for Ukrainians. And these presents mainly include abundant military vehicles and equipment, as you can see from this video. And then right here we can see a Russian soldier who is holding a sign that he was abandoned. And I mean, it looks like that the majority of Russians understood the order to save their lives literally. And yes, as a reminder, the main slogan of the Russian army in this war is that they do not abandon their own. I do have way more footage from today, but I'm simply not allowed to use it here. And if you want to see these prohibited photos and videos, I will upload some of them on my Discord and the rest will be available on my Patreon. All the useful links can be found down below. Alright, let's talk a little bit more about these presents from Russians to Ukrainians. I think it is pretty obvious that with all this abundant military equipment and military vehicles, Ukraine will only get stronger. And this will most certainly allow them to deoccupy the rest of the south in the nearest future much easier. And do you remember how for the last several months Ukraine was actively destroying military objects of Russians pretty much across the entire Kherson region? And at the same time, they were also destroying major bridges such as in Antonovka and Nova Kakhovka, as well as pontoons that Russians were creating. And well, right now we can see the results of these activities. First of all is that the supplies of Russians in Kherson were limited and that they were not able to properly resupply themselves. And because right now Russians can only pretty much cross Dnipro river by boats, the whole retreat is very slow. And taking into consideration how fast Ukraine advances across entire Kherson front line, approximately 20,000 of Russian soldiers in the northern part of this region are at risk of being captured as prisoners of war, or in the worst case scenario for them, to be eliminated. And because of this, according to Alexei Arestovich, he thinks that the Kherson region might be fully liberated within the next 2 to 3 weeks. But to be honest, I think that we will see a significant progress by the end of this week. And then we even have even more mind-blowing reports that Ukrainian partisans and individual groups are already in the city of Kherson, plus some other unconfirmed reports that the city is already surrounded. To be honest, I don't think this has happened yet, but it will very soon. Alright, so Russians retreat to the left side of Dnipro river, but the question is this even good for them? And I mean, just take a look at this picture, which shows us the difference between the left and the right side of Kherson region divided by Dnipro river. And as you can see, the entire infrastructure, roads and logistics is located on the right side, while on the left side we have pretty much nothing. There are no settlements in the close range, which basically means that Russians have nowhere to hide. And as soon as fighting starts on the left side of Dnipro river, these combat actions will be fair and square. And while the majority of Russian soldiers still wait to evacuate from the right side of Kherson region, those who already did it, reportedly, they're preparing to do a mass shelling of Kherson city. At the same time, according to Mikhailo Podolyak, retreating Russians plant mines in Kherson city. And as soon as the withdrawal is fully complete, or at least whenever there will be no more chances to escape, this is when Russians will execute their plan to completely ruin the city. So it's like, if we cannot have it, then no one ever will. And then, I mean, isn't Kherson is a part of Russia, according to them, of course. So the question is, will Russians follow through on this strategy and show the rest of the world their true nature? In case this happens, Russia will be shelling the right side of Kherson region, where it's mostly civilian infrastructure. Ukrainians will obviously respond by attacking the left side, but as you have already seen, there is pretty much nothing on that side of the river. And as soon as this part of the combat begins, we will see for sure which country is shelling civilian objects and which country is targeting military objects. And I mean, this time Russians will simply have no excuses. Why would Ukrainians target their own forces? And at the same time, since there is not much on the left bank of Dnipro river, Ukrainians will have the full liberty to shell Russian defensive positions as hard as they want. And so right here, allow me to demonstrate my personal assumptions how I think the liberation of Kherson will move forward. If you remember from my previous videos, approximately a month ago, I was already making the assumption that Ukrainians will divide Kherson region in 3 parts. And as for now, this is pretty much exactly what is happening. The main directions of Ukraine's counteroffensive comes from Dutchany, Davidov Brid, Snihurivka and Posad Pokrovsky. I also thought that the eastern part of this region will be the first one to be liberated. But right now I revised my estimations and now I think that all 3 of them will be liberated at the same time. At the same time, as soon as Ukraine can deoccupy Berislav and Kozatsky, this is when they have a little bit easier chances of crossing Dnipro river. Because at this very moment, the major line of defense of Russians is located across Kherson city. And by the time Ukrainians liberate the majority of Kherson region, hopefully the rest of them will be able to cross Dnipro in the east. Which means that this line of defense of Russians will be fighting against Ukrainians simultaneously from 2 different front lines. And while Russians might think that, okay, we are kinda safe right here, we crossed the river and we can now send supplies from Crimea. No, this is wrong. Because according both to Russian and Ukrainian sources, Ukraine has now full control over the main logistical routes in Crimea with their HIMARS. Which means that as soon as Ukraine can gain a foothold in Kherson and move their offensive weapons closer to the front line, this is when they start disrupting the Russian logistics even further. But this time, losing resupply lines from Crimea will be absolutely critical for Russians. And just like with Kherson, with no possibility to resupply themselves, the only last thing left for Russians to do will be to evacuate even deeper into the south. Which ultimately means that as soon as Ukraine can cross Dnipro river, this will be the total game over for Russia. If you want to support my work, please consider becoming my channel member, use a PayPal link or become my Patreon, where you will receive additional content. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.